Dormer arrives in this quiet, remote town with his partner, Hap Eckhart. They've come from Los Angeles to investigate the brutal murder of a teenage girl named Kay Connell. The crime has shaken the entire town. Places like Nightmute don't see violence like this, and the unsettling nature of the case makes it even more disturbing. From the moment Dormer steps into the investigation, it's clear he's not fully present. He's tired not just physically, but mentally. There's a heaviness in the way he moves, the way he speaks. Something is weighing on him, something he hasn't said out loud yet. As they begin examining the crime scene, the details reveal a chilling truth. Kay wasn't just killed, she was manipulated, lured into a vulnerable position. The killer didn't act in panic. He was calm, controlled, and deliberate. This wasn't a random act of violence. It was personal. Dormer starts piecing together Kay's life, her relationships, her habits, the people she trusted. Slowly, a pattern begins to form. Whoever killed her wasn't a stranger. It was someone who knew her well enough to gain her trust, someone who could get close without raising suspicion. Meanwhile, tension quietly builds between Dormer and his partner. Hap seems distant, careful with his words. There's an unspoken conflict between them, something unresolved. And Dormer senses it, even if he doesn't confront it directly. The truth is, back in Los Angeles, Dormer is under investigation. Internal Affairs suspects him of planting evidence in a previous case. And the worst part? Hap may be cooperating with them. The trust between the two men is already cracking, and the pressure of the current case only makes it worse. Despite everything, they move forward with a plan. They decide to use Kay's belongings as bait, hoping to lure the killer back to the scene. It's risky, but it might be their best chance to catch him. As they set up the stakeout, a thick fog rolls in, swallowing the landscape. Visibility drops to almost nothing. The air becomes heavy, disorienting. It's the perfect cover for both hunter and hunted. Then, through the mist, a figure appears. Dormer sees him first, just a shadow moving in the distance. Instinct takes over. He starts running, chasing the figure deeper into the fog. His heart pounds as he closes the distance, gun raised, ready to end it. The chase becomes chaotic. Shapes blur, footsteps echo, and the fog distorts everything. Dormer sees movement ahead and reacts without hesitation. He fires. The sound of the gunshot cuts through the silence. The figure drops, and as Dormer approaches, the fog begins to clear just enough for him to see the truth. It's Hap, his own partner. Time seems to stop. The weight of what just happened crashes down all at once. This wasn't the killer. This was a mistake, a fatal one. But instead of calling it in, instead of admitting the truth, Dormer makes a decision that changes everything. He lies. When the others arrive, Dormer tells them the suspect shot Hap and escaped into the fog. Just like that, the narrative is rewritten. The truth is buried, at least for now. But lies have consequences, and this one will follow him. As the investigation continues, a new presence begins to emerge. Detective Ellie Burr. She's young, sharp, and determined. More importantly, she looks up to Dormer. To her, he's a legend, someone who represents everything a detective should be. But admiration can quickly turn into doubt, because Ellie starts noticing things that don't quite add up. Small details, inconsistencies, tiny cracks in Dormer's story, and Dormer feels it. At the same time, the lack of sleep begins to take its toll. The endless daylight makes it impossible to rest. Dormer tries everything, closing curtains, taking pills, but nothing works. His mind never shuts off. Hours turn into days, and his grip on reality begins to slip. He starts seeing things that aren't there, hearing echoes of the past, reliving the moment he pulled the trigger over and over again. Guilt and exhaustion blend together, creating a constant state of confusion. Then, just when things couldn't get worse, Dormer receives a phone call. The voice on the other end is calm, controlled, almost unsettlingly normal. The man introduces himself as Walter Finch, and he has something important to say. He knows the truth. Finch was there in the fog. He saw everything: the chase, the shot, the moment Dormer killed his own partner. Suddenly, the situation shifts completely. Dormer is no longer just hiding a mistake. He's being watched, blackmailed. But Finch doesn't go to the police. He doesn't expose Dormer. Instead, he offers something unexpected: a deal. Finch claims that Kay's death wasn't intentional, that it was an accident, something that spiraled out of control. And he believes Dormer can understand that because of what happened in the fog. In Finch's mind, they're the same. Two men who made terrible mistakes. Two men who crossed a line. Dormer rejects the idea immediately. He refuses to see himself as anything like Finch. But deep down, the comparison starts to linger, because part of him knows there's some truth to it. Meanwhile, Ellie continues digging deeper into the case. Her instincts tell her something isn't right. She starts examining the evidence more closely, questioning the official version of events. And the closer she gets to the truth, the more dangerous things become for Dormer. The pressure builds from every direction. Finch continues to manipulate him, leaving clues, controlling the investigation from the shadows. Ellie gets closer to uncovering the truth, and Dormer's mind continues to deteriorate under the weight of exhaustion and guilt. Sleep becomes impossible, reality becomes unreliable, and time itself starts to blur. But Dormer isn't ready to give up. Despite everything, he starts forming a plan. If he can catch Finch, prove he's the killer, maybe he can regain control of the situation. Maybe he can bury the truth once and for all. It's a desperate move, but it's all he has left. The tension builds toward a final confrontation, not just between two men, but between truth and denial, guilt and justification. It all leads to a quiet, isolated cabin by the water. Dormer arrives first, barely holding himself together. His movements are slower now, his thoughts fragmented, but he still has one goal: end this. Then Finch arrives, calm, composed, almost at peace. They talk, and in that conversation, Finch makes one last attempt to justify everything. He insists that Kay's death wasn't murder, just a mistake, an accident that got out of control, just like what happened to Hap. He looks at Dormer and says they're not so different, and for a moment, Dormer hesitates, because the line between right and wrong has become blurred. But then something changes. Dormer finally sees things clearly. He realizes that accepting Finch's logic would mean losing the last piece of himself that still believes in justice, and he refuses. A struggle breaks out. Gunshots echo across the still water. When it's over, Finch lies dead, but Dormer isn't untouched. He's been shot badly. He collapses, his strength fading quickly. Moments later, Ellie arrives at the scene. She takes in everything: the bodies, the weapons, the silence, and then she looks at Dormer. In that moment, she understands the truth about Hap, the lie, everything. Dormer, now dying, looks up at her. There's no pride left in his eyes, no strength, just regret. He tells her not to make the same mistakes, not to lose herself the way he did. He urges her to choose what's right, no matter how difficult it is. It's the final lesson from a broken man. And then he dies. Ellie stands there, alone, holding the truth. She looks down at the shell casing, the one piece of evidence that could expose Dormer's lie, the one thing that could rewrite the entire story. For a long moment, she says nothing, does nothing. Then, quietly, she drops it into the water. And just like that, the truth disappears. The case is closed. The killer is dead, and Will Dormer is remembered as a hero. But Ellie knows the reality.